Hi everybody, I'm Arthur, I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Arthur.
And I have done this work the way it's laid out in the book with a sponsor who did the same and still does the same. I too still practice these principles and I pray and hope that I continue to. You know, it's saved my life. So I think that, you know, looking back on having made this inventory, at the time it was the next step. You know, I'd spent a long time writing inventory, almost 2.5 years, and I had a lot to talk about, and, you know, it was redundant. The whole fifth step was complete redundancy. It was a novel of of just the most horrible kind of fullness of self that I've ever seen about myself. There was a novel about everything in my head, and it was completely self-absorbed, and it was riddled with lies and based upon lies. And but I would not have been able to see that had I not been sitting with somebody who had done the same and could see through and discern all the dishonesty. Because I was coming from a place of complete and utter confusion. And I was disconnected in the things that I thought were true. You know, the lie became the truth, and the truth became the lie. I am so thankful that I met someone who had been through this. There's so much to talk about. I mean, it's so much more than the fifth step is the physical act. It's like, it's like a car. The fifth step is like, just one aspect of starting a car. It's hard to dismiss the rest of the car. But it's vital, because like a car, if you don't have a key, fifth step, and you don't turn it, then the car doesn't start. So it has to happen. But at the time, that's what it felt like. It was just the very next thing to do. You know, I wasn't expecting any profound revelations from my fifth step. And after reading, the first week of inventory, it was clear I wasn't going to have any, because it was the same stuff over and over and over again. I think if there was a revelation, the revelation was the constant throwing up and regurgitation of truth that was reflected from my sponsor's mouth every time that I read another resentment. That was probably the revelation. The revelation was a constant reminder of how wrong I was about everything. I had the beauty and the magic of it was the validation that I'm actually physically doing some tangible work and demonstrating this idea and relationship that I'm now trying to acquire with the concept of God. That was the magic in the fifth step, was that I was physically taking steps on my own, of my own fruition, to get closer to this new relationship that I was trying to unpack with God. But in order to do that, everything had to be cleaned. And I think the book is very good at touching on what that looks like when it says things like, we've put our finger on certain things. That's not the same as a complete understanding. That's like you've touched it, but you haven't tasted it. So there's a subtle reminder there that, be ready, because you're just now peeling the scab back. It's a huge turning point. Like you're about to swallow big chunks of truth about yourself for the first time, where the only place it's celebrated is here. I mean, like you go out in the world, right, into life, and people who don't suffer from a disease like we do, And you might be talking about this story to a non-alcoholic person who maybe has some life principles, and they're not going to be surprised. They'll be confused that it's such a big deal to you. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, that's the normal thing. Because it is the normal thing. Here, it's a magical thing. Because for me, I was just, and like most of us, I was fully separated from the truth. So it is magical. It is celebrated here. It's a huge milestone. It marks the turning point in a way of thinking that almost killed me. You know, the drugs and the alcohol, nothing more but than a manifestation of a deeper problem. That's it. You know, fill in the blanks, sex, gambling, whatever it is. Internal breakdown, external is where it's demonstrated. You know, as within, so without. That kind of thing. But I didn't know any of that. I just had my sponsor who said, you know, write the inventory. And I was excited about the new things that I was going to do. I had already at this point in fifth, you know, by the time I got to my fifth step, I was definitely ready to sit down and read it all. I wasn't sure what that was going to look like. You know, the book doesn't talk about, you know, this is the process. You should be in this room. There should be this many candles. There should be this much ritual. It doesn't talk about any of that. So it was just it was dinner at his house. I drove from Sturbridge to Watertown like 3 times a week after work. And I had to do it on his schedule. Nothing was comfortable for me. Nothing was accommodating for me. It was all about, here's when I get out of work, Arthur. Dinner served at 5. Make sure you're here. And then from 8 to 11, you read and then drive home. And I did that for 5 months. That's what it took for me to read it. And I kept doing it because I believed and was willing to believe that if I could just get through this next step, then 6 and 7, and I could then prepare for amends and so on and so forth. And at that point, I was so taken with the spirit of step study community and the process of doing this work and the process of all these new changes that I was now part of, that I would be able to get on the other side of it, and I would finally be able to share with the community I'd grown up with in step study and talk about all the things that had happened to me during my inventory and my 3rd step and so on and so forth. So it really didn't matter how long it took. I wasn't wrapped up in you know, hitting the finish mark. You know, I think at this point I started to really comprehend and understand that I was really, really broken. Like, I had a lot of work to do. And I also was humbled by the fact that I knew I wasn't going to do any of it on my own. And if I thought that I might be able to continue my life being completely self-accountable, which was not working, which I didn't have the honesty to be with, nor did I have the physical sponsor, you know, at that time when I wasn't being accountable to bounce things off of and check things to myself, or a relationship with God at that point. It was clearly not going to work to live my life with self-accountability. And if I questioned that, I had 5 subjects, you know, five subject notebooks to reflect on. You know, and if that wasn't enough, I could just look around the people in my life that had been directly or indirectly affected by the breakdown in my psychology, which manifested into the way that I managed my relationships with people. You know, my work relationships, my personal relationships, you know. It doesn't take long to sit with somebody who's out of their mind to realize they're out of their mind. People, you sit with them long enough and have conversation enough, and you can really see if you're in a state of mind where you can see clearly and you can see healthy, and you're practicing principles, it doesn't take long to see the dishonesty, the confusion in a person's psychology. So I could be, and the reason I bring that up is because my life prior to this work would be that I could be in a situation where to all appearances I seemed psychologically balanced, which only would create even further confusion for people who knew that I wasn't. I mean, think about what a trip that is, because they're like, now they're thinking like, is there something wrong with me? You know, like, did I just hear that, or did I just see him do that? Like, that was kind of my life. Like, people didn't understand why I did the stuff that I did, and that was only made worse by the fact that I didn't either. So that creates all this discomfort and isolation. In uniqueness, terminal uniqueness, where and if you're living in that way, there's no doubt you're going to walk through life stepping on toes. There's no doubt you're going to make constant offense to other people because you're only looking through the lens of your own eyes, and if that's broken, then you're looking through a lens of shit. If it's muddy, then it's muddy. It's not clear. I told myself it was clear. Meanwhile, there's wreckage behind me. And everybody else was offended and hurt. So what drove me through this work, early on was the excitement of this gathering and this focus and this concentration and the concept of what would it look like if I can really have a relationship with God, if I could really learn how to yield to myself. And the fifth step was just another step in that process. So there isn't a whole lot to talk about because when it comes to that experience, other than, I took the physical steps like it's written in the book. I finally finished speaking to my sponsor constantly about the same things, and he validated many of the things for me in my fifth step that were difficult to talk about, that were exposed by light, and comforted me in sharing similar experiences or identical experiences that he had. But even that just in itself was just all it was just it was a little comfort, and I'm thankful for that. But what was important is that I kind of blasted past that and I went on to the next steps. And I did the physical things. I went out, when I was done my fifth step, it was like 9:30 at night, I think like on a Wednesday. I think it was like February. It was cold. And I said, I'm going to go home and spend my hour with God. And he said, no, you don't, no. I'll wait for you. You can go outside. And I went outside. And it was cold, and I sat in his yard for an hour. And I thank God from the bottom of my heart that I knew him better, and I thanked him for having met that person. And I thanked him for the opportunity. And I felt like I had achieved probably one of the most important things I'd ever done in my life. So if there's a feeling I can talk about, that's the one that occurred. Is that I intuitively knew that I had just done something unlike anything else I had ever done in my life. And I drove home with the confidence in that and took my book down from the shelf and I sat in the recliner that I had at the time at home, and I looked at 6 and 7, and but we're not there. So that was kind of the construct of my fifth step. So it was just a lot of work and a lot of the same conversation. In and of itself, I think that's all it is. So it functions as it is supported by 4, and it functions through the following steps. That's what kind of pumps life into the step itself. Because if you stopped there, then it would just mean that you stopped there. And if you stop there, then you haven't completed process, you haven't completed change. You can expect not to have the entire psychic change that the book says is required if someone's going to have a psychological change. It doesn't say you should consider having a psychological change. It says we think it's a must, it's required in order to bring about the entire psychic change that's necessary for one to have recovery. So they don't try to make mortar without sand. It's pretty clear. It's not a half measure process. My psychological condition was in an extreme state. It wasn't a half state. I was beyond the point of sitting with therapists and fixing it myself or them fixing it. It was beyond human aid. So if I'm that alcoholic, then I need an extreme solution. So I think that's important, and in just mentioning, maybe to help people identify where they are as alcoholics. I think the book is very clear about talking about not everybody who drinks is an alcoholic. There are certain criteria that's met for a person who's an alcoholic. I happen to meet it. I've not been able to control my desire for alcohol with my own aid. I can't right myself when I need to. I lack the power that's necessary to do that. And so for all of those reasons and more, we do step 5. Only if a person is willing to take that step, is willing to repent. I mean, the 5th step is a repentance step. It's an accountability, it's ownership. Forgive those who have offenses with Catholic religion and terms like that. I don't mean to offend you. It's just the first word that came to mind. But make no mistake about it, it's a confession. And a repentance is to change that way. And the whole book, you can find it in A Spiritual Experience. Change is mentioned like 17 different times. At its core, it means to change. They say it in different words, but the function of that word is change. To go from one state of thinking to an entirely new way of thinking is a change. I knew enough at this point, having an inventory, that if my change was a half change, then that's all it is. The 5th step prepared me, I feel, to let go of all the things. It showed me, it was a revelation in revealing the things to me that were blocking me. But I'm saying it because I don't want people to get to a place, this is me trying to control certain things, but that haven't happened, but I don't want people to get to the place and feel like there's this goal. It's a milestone. That's it. It's literally just the beginning. Fast forward 23 years into this work, which is where I am now. Believe me, I've learned a lot from where I was my first 2 years, which is when this work took place. And what I've learned is how much I didn't know. And that's been very humbling in helping me. Amy and I were just discussing our age and how much she's learned in her age. That's why this comes to mind. But I appreciated what she said because I share that same sentiment. That I'm in a different place, so it means so much more to me. This is a very slow process. This isn't going to happen quickly. My experience has been that it hasn't happened quickly. I can rush through the work, I can hammer the work, and that's great, and I'll be a walking big book for a long time, and then people in open meetings will hate me and crucify me and persecute me. I've been through that and got browbeaten. Pretty much people, walk in a room and they start going to different rooms because there's excitement and there's energy when you start, and you're at that point in 5th step, you are on fire. I mean, like, and I mean, like everything revolved around this work. And the work is only the stepping stool to the result in the end, which is a functioning relationship with God as you understand him, like it says in We Agnostics, which will solve your problem in which you can live. So if you come back to step 2 in We Agnostics, that's the function. The whole purpose of the book, every step we take, is to come into a living relationship with God. I didn't write that. I talk about it at meetings and people are offended constantly. That's just what happens. In that way, I've grown through it. I've now become equipped, properly armed with facts about myself so that I can then go out and practice a confident step 12, knowing that I'm not playing God at this point. But in order to experience that, the pride, ego, and things that have driven me up into this point that bought me the seat here really have to get unplugged and dismantled. 5 is the beginning process of that. 4 is the work to 5. 3 is the willingness to approach 4. And out of 3 comes the courage to do 5. That's why the third step is, how many times do people here that have sit down to write their inventory say the third step prayer? Out of that comes the courage to continue. God, I offer myself to thee. Okay, Arthur, then shut up and write and prove it. It's great. I like to live in I'm doing all of these things, but meanwhile, my notebook's closed and my pen is down. I can think I'm doing something like I did for 20 years in AA by putting a book on my headboard at home and then say I was a member of AA. I would think it was no joke that they wrote, we took the book down from the shelf, because that's basically where it was, right? Like for me, it sat there through open AA meetings, and I thought I was practicing AA because I had one of these at home. I had a pile of colored chips, and I made coffee. And that's the truth. And in that, I found some confidence. The question is, if you're in that or been in that, is it and has it been enough to do what's necessary in here to bring about the change that the book says an alcoholic needs? So I talk about all that because there's all these realizations in step 5. It really is the beginning. At this point, you're either going to maintain where you've been or you're going to change. On my own, I can't bring about that change no matter how much I wish it or I will it. This work is a demonstration. You want the book to be moved, you have to physically take it and move it. No more living in the place where I convince myself the book is moved, even though my hand hasn't lifted it. And that's the world that I lived in for 20 years. Apply that to every relationship, and you've got a lot of broken relationships. I think I treated her like I loved her. I think I was kind. I think I listened. I think I was supportive. You know what I found out here? No one gives a shit what you think. And learning that, which was the transition, which is what took place through this, was the awareness of, holy crap, it's not the way that I think it is. I got a lot of catching up to do. That is the revelation in magic through step work. You go from one way of thinking to an entirely new way of thinking, where the person's ideals become grounded in something other than themselves. Right? That's the purpose. How does a person do that without first understanding the context in which all of it's being practiced to begin with, which is that we're to find a relationship with God, which then he or it solves our problem. He or it doesn't mean Arthur. The whole process is about self-removal. It's about self-humbling, the smashing of one's pride, which is the very thing that will make sure that I'll convince myself that I can still use alcohol and drugs. Pride. Self-control. Self-movement. Self-everything. Good luck with self. Self's expensive, that's what I say. And it's dangerous. I'll just close with saying that, so my wife went through a major surgery, an elective surgery, this past couple weeks, and so I had to take a week off from work to support and be there for her, and everything that meant, running back and forth to the hospital, her inability to drive, her inability to walk, her inability to take a shower on her own, all these things that I had to do, most of which I did not enjoy. Trust me, it was hard. A whole new respect for people who are CNAs and nurses. Like, wow, people who take care of people who are disabled. Like, I hit the tip of the iceberg and I was crying. Like, it was tough. But so I did it, and I was really concerned that I made sure that I wanted to make sure that I went through it in a way that I could create for her this experience where she felt supported. Because I had 20 years of her not feeling supported by me. Or more or less having a relationship with me, which meant waiting for the shoe to drop for her to be worried about something else. That's not a relationship. That's suffering. So on the back end of it, now fast forward, it's actually longer, it's been almost 5 weeks, 4.5 weeks. She's much stronger, up doing her own thing, and she's almost back to her normal self. And so then Valentine's Day rolled around, and I came home, and she had this beautiful candlelight dinner on the table for me. And it was absolutely gorgeous. There was this, and there was this lemonade drink that she wrote the word love potion on. And it was really, really, I felt really good. And I said, wow, you didn't have to do any of this. And she said, well, I wanted to do it because I was worried that it might be hard for you to support me through this surgery, but then it didn't seem like it was hard for you. Like, I felt like you were entirely there. And that's why I wanted to make this dinner for you. And I realized I had finally done something for her that I couldn't give her 20 years prior. Because I was too wrapped up in Arthur. Just something that small. And I can't share that out there. People that have husbands and wives are like, dude, that's what you do when you're married. They're not going to cookie pat me. Good job, Arthur. Here I can get raised up, but out there I'm not, But it was beautiful. And so she, I said if she was feeling better, she could have come today, and it would have been great for her to be a part of it, but she patted me on the butt and said, have fun, do what you do, and I'm thankful that I'm a husband, finally, and I understand what that means. And it's not the same as being somebody who just provides money and overhead. It means a lot more than that. And so the principle in love and support and kindliness and tolerance of others, in principle, I just share that to show that those are the same principles that I try to carry in the relationships that I have today. They're all applicable. You don't have to be married to that person. The principle is what brings the steps alive. Step 5 is the awareness that you need new principles. That's basically what it is. That's what I would say about that. Thank you so much for letting me share.